Hi, everyone. I am Haley Perry, the founder and CEO of Dandi. We are a conscious beauty firm, and you are on with us today for our first Beyond the Bench for 2022. And if you're not familiar with Dandi or Beyond the Bench, Dandi is a conscious beauty firm. We are a B2B solution for the beauty industry, bringing together product creators, ingredient companies, service providers. We try to be that great connector so we can really create positive change, one product on one day at a time. We created a Dandi sustainability report last year in 2021. And out of that were some really interesting conversations centered around sustainability trends. And from that research and work on sustainability trends, the Beyond the Bench podcast was formed, or LinkedIn Live, not a podcast, LinkedIn Live. And so we are covering various topics this year. So DEI is the first topic that we're covering, and that's diversity, equity, and inclusion for the beauty industry. So we have some amazing guests to bring on screen right now. Thank you all so much for joining us. You all have very diverse and different backgrounds, personally, professionally, and within your organization. So I'm so pleased to have you all here. So welcome. And first, I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves. Melissa, I would love to hear from you. If you can just give a little intro, like who you are and your company, and then we'll move on from there.
Sure. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you, Haley, for including me in such an important discussion. My name is Melissa Hago, and I'm the VP and Creative Director of Beauty and Wellness at the trend forecasting agency Fashion Snoops. So for those not familiar with Fashion Snoops, we track cultural and lifestyle shifts, and we really help brands understand how these shifts will impact consumer wants and needs. So we service brands, retailers, consumer-facing industries in over 50 countries. And our mission is really to provide insight and to enhance business decisions driven by trends with an understanding of the why behind the trend.
I love that, understanding the why, and it's very broad in all regards. Next, Ashley, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Presti. I'm currently the creative director at Natural Models LA. I've been in the fashion and beauty industry for the last about 17 years in all different roles, from casting, production, and then most recently as creative director. At Natural, we've kind of been like a pioneer in this new movement of diversity within the modeling industry, kind of not only with agencies and clients, but also to like the greater consumer community. We represent a really vast range of talent from different ethnic backgrounds, body diversity, sexual orientations, abilities, and disabilities. So I'm really excited to be a part of this great movement that we're all here for.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you so much. Next, we have Ms. Jennifer Norman.
Hello, Haley. Hello, LinkedIn. Thank you so much for having me today. I am Jennifer Norman. I'm the founder and chief human officer of the Human Beauty Movement, as well as Humanist Beauty. I've been in the beauty industry for a couple of decades now, really cut my teeth at bigger companies and also worked for a lot of smaller indie beauty companies. And, along the way, I had really discovered the importance of radical inclusivity and what that really means as far as acceptance and understanding within the beauty industry. And so, the Human Beauty Movement that I founded a couple of years ago is really all about beauty positivity. And it's something that really is, it's a movement that starts within each individual person. It's really an inside job. It's wonderful for us to have discussions like this where we can come together and talk about how we can change the world, but the world won't change unless we do. And so I really love to focus on self-esteem and that discovery of the light that's inside all of us that can make us all shine brighter.
Oh, thank you so much, Jennifer. You do such deep work, and I love when you articulate, every time I hear you articulate your brand. And last, we have Cece Meadows. We're really new to each other, Cece, but I was super, super, super excited to have you as a guest on. So can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Cece Meadows, and I'm the founder and CEO of Prado's Beauty.
and we are located in Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is traditionally Mescalero Apache land. And what we do is we create cosmetics for everyone. We bring our indigenous roots and stories, creatives, and we put that on our packaging, on our boxes. And we're the first Chicana and indigenous owned beauty brand to be in a mega retailer. And so that is something that we're super proud of. And while we are inclusive to everyone, I always tell people that our goal is to 100% always be inclusive, but to also teach you about indigenous cultures along the way and our truths and our resilience and our beauty as a people and culturally. So yeah, that's pretty much what Prados Beauty and what I dedicate my life to. So
That's amazing. Thank you, Cece, and everyone for sharing. And I'm sure by just hearing the introductions, I really believe when I was forming this panel that we could have a different look at DEI than what we've talked about in this past year. So having everything from the trends, very broadly, what's happening in fashion and our perceptions of beauty, looking at radical inclusivity and really this important topic of Indigenous people. So a lot of times, at least what I saw last year was a heavy focus on BIPOC, which if you're not familiar with that term or that acronym, it's Black Indigenous People of Color. And for very obvious and important reasons, we really focus on the Black part of BIPOC. But I really wanted to bring forward the Indigenous people of color to this conversation as well. So we're going to bring up our individual guest just to go a little bit deeper into a question for each of you. And then we're going to bring you all back for a panel discussion, a Q&A, and unpack some of these things a little bit more. So first up, we have Melissa, as we're going to from Fashion Snoops, as we talk very broadly about DEI and what's showing up as a trend forecaster. So Melissa, welcome.
Yeah, yes.
And are you up on the screen with me?
Not yet, but probably when I start talking.
Okay.
But yeah, so I mean, I think over the last few years, we've seen a huge shift when it comes to DEI. For so long, inclusivity has kind of been focused on race and color. You know, we saw the whole Fenty effect with the 50 Shades of foundations. And I think that's definitely something that we're seeing change to be more inclusive to other areas. So, you know, expanding to more genderless, expanding to packaging for disabilities, expanding to catering to other body parts. And I think part of this is happening because, you know, the consumer is demanding more representation, more transparency, more charitable efforts, and more inclusive options. And a reason to having this big shift, you know, I know technology a lot of times is seen as like the bad guy, but in the end, it's like everyone has access to everyone now. You know, everyone's able to see, get information from a brand, see if they're greenwashing, see, you know, what's behind the ingredient list. So I think this has really been the radical push for having to be more inclusive, because consumers can just, you know, talk to a brand or reach out to them. And then I think also, you know, again, for so long, there was almost like, okay, politics cannot be part of like business. And that has changed. You know, now we're discussing politics, we're discussing race and gender. And that's continued to also disrupt industries and really challenge, you know, societal norms, and really having brands take a stand. You know, again, there's no more of that separation. Now consumers want brands that align with important issues that they stand for. There's a lot of different areas that we're seeing shifts to. I'll kind of touch on some of the top ones. I think one of the, or else I'll just take over. So yeah, I'll definitely just touch on some of the top ones. But I think one of the big ones, and especially within the wellness area, it is about becoming more authentic, open, diverse. You know, a lot of companies having to change their narratives, especially when it comes to cultural appropriation, you know, definitely highlighting the history and traditions. We're seeing the decolonization movement become an important topic of conversation. And this is, you know, helping consumers either deal with racial trauma or really just embrace their roots. Some of my favorite influencers include Juliet Diaz. She's an indigenous Taína and Cuban American activist, and she has her book about plant witchery, which really brings awareness to the sacredness and spirit of plants. And what's great about that is that, something like witchcraft, spirituality has always, again, been kind of looked down to, and kind of like embracing that that's part of the roots. Especially in the Latinx community, we're seeing, again, a lot of this leaning into the ancestral knowledge, reclaiming the wellness space. Another influencer, the Brujas of Brooklyn, they're just rebranding spirituality for their community. So again, just decolonizing a lot of these different movements. Someone says you have a bunch of people waiting on the wrong spot. I don't know if that's something we need to check on. Okay. I'll keep talking though. I think another area is also there's a demand for more meaningful action from brands as this new era, again, of accountability emerges. So last year, Unilever announced that they decided to remove the term normal from their beauty packaging in order to be more positive, inclusive, and really just align with, again, consumer expectations. And a lot of this did stem from the Black Lives Matter movement. I think that definitely was a catalyst of like having this radical change and, again, removing things like whitening, lightening fair. Other brands like Japanese beauty brand Kao, L'Oreal, they also removed some of these terms to support inclusivity within the Asian market. Within the fragrance industry, we're seeing the term Oriental being phased out. So just seeing, again, not just in the products that are being made, but also in the language used. And I think at the end, we're going to continue to track important discussions, hair discrimination, neglected spaces like sunscreen, acknowledging other global holidays like Lunar New Year, Holi, Ramadan. And I think, a big one, which is a topic we're talking about today, is, the whole sustainable inclusivity. So seeing blogs like Melanin and Sustainable Style, which is really disrupting the environmental justice landscape of really inspiring, Black and brown people to not just, be in style, but also live sustainable. And I'll just end it at, what was once kind of product businesses are now people business. And, consumers will continue to look to some of these companies that are more empathetic and support their needs.
I love all of that. And one of the things that Fashion Snoops does so well, and it really aligns with Dandi Day, like everything you're echoing, Dandi Day's working alongside to find the ingredients, the solutions to make these products happen. And it's definitely the same thing that I'm seeing as well as I'm going through the research. So thank you for all of that great insight. So we're going to come back and bring you back on the Q&A. And next,
and I'll share my email just in case. I know a lot of people just entered the live, so in case anyone missed that, I'll make sure to share that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and as you're coming on, if you have any questions, please type them in the comments. After everyone speaks, we're gonna choose some questions, and the more comments we have, the more engaging we can make this as well. So next we have Ashley from Natural Models. Welcome, Ashley.
Hi.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing about how, for your company, diversity really isn't a trend, but you're doing so much more. So can you just share a little bit more about what you mean by diversity isn't a trend, and it's more than a trend? I guess that's your tagline.
It's who we are.
Yeah, it's who you are.
Yeah.
And also just share, what is it that you're seeing looking forward in the next 5 to 10 years as you're in this interesting space of translating and connecting visually between like a brand ethos and the consumer or the buyer of the product?
Yeah, definitely. We say diversity isn't a trend, it's who we are. I think especially in the fashion industry or just beauty in general as well, we find companies that are kind of leaning always towards like the trend of what's going on and what we should be showcasing to kind of help their businesses, where I think Natural from the forefront has always saw that there was a void, especially in modeling agencies, that there was a need to kind of represent all these beautiful and incredible women that are kind of either only being highlighted at certain times instead of all around. So I think it's really just been this, it's not just a trend to have curve and plus, it's not just a trend to have the real sizing, it's not a trend just to have some specific ethnic backgrounds or sexual orientations or what have you, that these women, all of us, like should be represented all the time. And I think even not only externally, but we're also showcasing that internally with our team. It's equally diverse as much as we are externally facing as well.
It's really interesting. Before I came into the beauty industry on this side, I worked at a modeling agency, and that's where I met Sarah, and I know that she's our connection. And I do remember kind of looking around, thinking like nobody really looks like me, and I just felt so ugly, like working at the modeling agency. And I remember I was like so tall and slender and beautiful, and I was like, I'm kind of like short and just different.
Trying to break that mold in a sense. Like the world is ever changing, and I think more and more, especially kind of even leading into what you were asking as well, is where do we see things is I think a lot of consumers and the general population is just kind of done with seeing the facade of what everyone should look like and just wanting to see like some more reality and genuine, and just trying to see ourselves as much as possible, just because it becomes more real. For example, like when we see aging ads or something with like skin creams, we don't want to see like the young model. We want to see like the real human that's going to be like utilizing it. And I think everyone just wants to kind of feel that they're enough. Like you don't have to keep trying to be someone else, that you can just be beautiful who you are and express that too.
And that authenticity, I think that's what I'm hearing you say, is that we're craving authenticity.
Yes. Yeah. So, more than ever, I think now, especially in the last few years.
And it's great to have that advocacy, I think, through a modeling agency. I'm not sure that's something that a lot of people think about, but as you are owning kind of that image and really helping influence that image, it's great when people recognize themselves in what's out there in the world.
Yeah. And I think it can easily be forgotten. Like, as I remember growing up, I maybe kind of always saw the same thing and not realizing that there is more, or the world that I see from my eyes. And I think it's so beautiful now that even I think of children or just young girls being able to see more of a variety and know that they're beautiful too. They can be who they are. They can like accent their features and all of those things instead of needing to fit into a mold.
And I think it's also a way of exploration too. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and it's interesting to watch her get dressed and how she likes to identify through what she wears and how she dresses up. And I think about when I was her age, I had there were very defined norms of what I should wear or how I should look. And it's just fun to see the inspiration that's out there, and my daughter can gravitate to those things and explore it. And I think that's a healthy part of shaping her identity.
For sure. I agree. I have a 9-year-old daughter as well. And my biggest thing is like, I kind of just always let her, especially with clothing, I'm like, you do you, because we control like so much of their world, like let them have their expression. And I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, her school picture was a superhero. She was Wonder Woman for her school picture.
That's
and I
amazing.
just let it, because I'm like, that's what she wants to do and be, and that's who she feels. You go, girl.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, and that's also just a perfect segue into bringing up Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you so much, Ashley. Jennifer, you are all about superheroes, and you yourself are a super mom, superhero, superwoman. And I'm so thankful to call you my friend.
Oh my goodness.
And so your company is one of the few that's really addressing the abilities community. And that's why, and that's one of the perspectives that I really wanted to dig a little bit deeper in and for you to share in this conversation. As it's something that Melissa just touched on in terms of some of like the trends. But I'd love to hear about that from your perspective.
Thanks so much for letting me talk about this. It's something that is near and dear to my heart. And as you mentioned, I am a mom, and I have my special guest next to me. This is my son, Kyle, everybody.
Hey, Kyle.
Kyle is my superhero, super warrior boy. He has a chronic illness and does have some abilities, conditions that, he is supported with throughout his life. And I will say that he has been one of my biggest inspirations into really diving into what the meaning of beauty truly is. It really, after being in the beauty industry for so long, which had customarily focused on the exterior, and as Ashley and you were mentioning, thinking about what we look like and whether or not we're conforming to a certain expectation. Boy, Kyle has been one that has truly opened up my eyes and opened up my heart to really understanding that, there is so much positivity and light and opportunity for us to recognize what value and what importance and what beauty there is in everybody that we meet. And so what I wanted to do when I developed the human beauty movement was really incorporate a sense of mindfulness that I had learned, and really kind of going the extra mile, because what I had discovered is, with my experience with Kyle, nothing is easy. It's always like you have to do some, extra little things, like even like these things like I have to, like, we call it MacGyvering. It's like everything that you can do to make life a little bit easier or a little bit more comfortable. I'll hand make these things for him, or, we'll look for things that can, just help to simplify or make things a little bit more convenient. But then when you are able to find a company or a brand that does that thinking for you, there is love for life. One of the examples is this sweater that Kyle is wearing right now is from Tommy Hilfiger, and it is actually an accessible sweater. It's made with magnetic buttons, so that you don't have, like, if somebody has a difficult time actually, undoing or doing their own buttons up, this is just a little convenience that makes our lives so much easier. And so, one of the things that I did when I was coming up with the human beauty movement and our brand was, thinking about people who are in their bathrooms and, maybe have visual or blindness, challenges that they're facing with, how difficult it must be for them to discern what products that they're using. And so, something like a little brow tag, while it's not much, it's just something that, perhaps, we decided to offer that, again, can just go that little extra mile to help with other people knowing that, we're thinking of them, we're doing our best, and we always want to see what more we can do and innovate to help those that had perhaps been marginalized in the past or had been otherwise overlooked. And there are really great companies doing a lot of wonderful things. Aside from the fashion industry, there are a lot of companies that are doing Braille. There are other companies that are doing tactile types of packages so that it's easier for them to, identify packages from the way that they feel. And certainly the abilities community is not homogeneous. And I think that that's where a lot of companies get a little bit tripped up. But the most important thing that I would say in terms of advice for companies is, don't let the fear of making a mistake hold you back. Do whatever you do out of listening and out of love and out of kindness, and then you'll never go wrong. I decided to make my company a B corporation, a benefit company, because I knew that, from a financial perspective, a lot of companies don't necessarily think that it's going to hit the bottom line, because there is so much personalization and so much of, thinking that this is a small community that we're not necessarily going to get payback out of. But to me, it's important. And I think that the more purpose-driven and the more mindful that companies are, they recognize that those are the companies that not only care about their consumers, but they care about their employees. They care about the entire stakeholder ecosystem, and it makes a difference.
Yeah, it definitely makes a difference. And it's, I think as you are bringing light to this conversation around creating products for people with disabilities and being a B Corp in a newer company, I see you at the forefront of inspiring other brands to think about, how do we be more inclusive? And it doesn't have to be through creating a brand new product. It could be deepening the roots of how do we deepen and extend our reach to all people that we want to touch, and just recognizing the humanity, which is so much a part of what you do. It is the ethos of who you are. And so thank you so much for leading in this area and so many other areas. Jennifer, you're
That's my
incredible. Yes. So thank you so much. And we're going to bring up Cece next to talk about her brand, Prados Beauty, and just your experience. I shared a little bit before, and you did as well, Cece, about being an Indigenous brand and what that means for you. But it's interesting. I discovered you on LinkedIn because I love LinkedIn, like so many of my other friends here, and I know that you were chosen by JCPenney's to be one of their brands, and so it was kind of an aha moment for me because I had been thinking about Indigenous brands and what the beauty industry was going to look like for Indigenous people groups. And I always thought about ingredients, but to see an actual brand dedicated to the education and culture of an Indigenous community. I wanted to ask you more about if there's another brand out there like you or other Indigenous people that are out there like you. Can you share a little bit about how have retailers like JCPenney and 13 Loon, who you're working with, how have they really prioritized this conversation and these partnerships with underserved communities like Indigenous peoples?
Yeah, so we, Prados Beauty makes up like the less than 1% in the eye of what BIPOC means. And, it's not that there aren't other Indigenous beauty brands. It's just that the focus has been so much on, other areas that needed attention. They needed this attention that I feel like when Indigenous beauty brands are trying to say like, hey, here we are, sometimes it can, be difficult. One, for me, personally, it's just because of funding and, being able to, afford the, PR firms that put you in front of everyone or, be able to scale a brand so that you're ready to go to retail. So those are the types of things that we've been met with, as a beauty brand, but as a people, if you think about Indigenous people and, the social economic impacts that have, happened over hundreds of years, it's kind of a responsibility on our part that we have this opportunity where, we have this amazing partnership with 13 Loon and JCPenney's. This is a time for us to take up that space as best we can and share the stories as best that we can. And so I'm not the only Indigenous owned beauty brand out there. There's Cheekbone Beauty, which is a Canadian based brand, and they are in Sephora online. And then I think they have some locations in the Sephora's in Canada. And then there's Asha Beauty, which is a Navajo Diné owned beauty brand that is from Arizona. I'm originally from Arizona, so to see that is, really exciting, especially for the Navajo Nation because they have stores on the Navajo Nation.
Oh, wow.
And so, for us to, and then there's a lot of smaller little beauty brands that are independently owned beauty brands. They're young girls who have lash lines or lipstick lines, or, there are some that have, beauty like skin care lines. And so I think that the focus of really drawing attention and creating a space for them also is what has made us so successful as a brand. I started off as a New York Fashion Week makeup artist and, going to New York Fashion Week in traditional, regalia, like wearing hats or, wearing a shirt that said strong, Indigenous, or resilient on it. And people, the models asking, oh, what's Indigenous or what is Indigenous? Like, what's Indigenous? It was just like, this can be one of the most exciting days of my life, but also one of the saddest because it felt like real-time erasure is what it felt like. And so when I decided that Prados Beauty needed to be something that the world really needed to know about, it was with that heart work, as I call it, and that responsibility to tell our story and to, you know, educate people that we're still here. We're not just a story in a history book. We're not just, you know, someone who's wearing a fake headdress off Etsy. You know, like we are real people, and we're real here, and we're still here. And so that's the responsibility of Prados and what we do.
Yeah, it's beautiful heart work, and it's very moving. It moves me just to hear you talk about your experience, and as you're saying, feeling like it's like you're being erased, like right before your eyes, in that invisibility. Yeah, I know what that feels like. I think Jennifer and I are both adopted Korean adoptees, and she and I, Jennifer, right? You and I have talked about this, of just kind of being invisible, and so to have you create this brand as representation, and I think as we're hearing from Melissa, some of those trends of like decolonization and really looking at Indigenous people groups, it is that voice. It's that, I think that's the equity part of DEI is, hey, we're creating spaces, we're lifting up for it to be more equitable. So I'd love to have everybody else come back on, and we can go through just an open discussion. You all shared just such beautiful things. It just feels like a really healing like talk and time together. So I won't cry. I cry a lot. I won't cry, but I would just love to open the floor for you all to talk and share and ask questions and provide some feedback. We might be having a little technical difficulty but yeah, please, the floor is all there for you guys. Any thoughts? Okay. Well, Jennifer, one of the things that I know that you're working on, as we just kind of carrying on from Cece's conversation of being invisible and looking at maybe racism and just, I guess, ignorance, for lack of a better word. You're doing some really interesting work around conversations on racism, and so I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it is fascinating because I know that, over the past couple of years, society has really come to a head, hasn't it? And I think that it's really opened the door for some real interesting conversations. And with those conversations, I think that there is this notion that there's a lot of pain that does come up in those conversations. There's a lot of history that gets brought forward, and people really are in that moment of feeling, what has happened, with the slavery movement, and, what is going on with feeling like we are of Asian descent and being categorized and all coupled together and being blamed for a pandemic, which really, nobody necessarily can be blamed for. But I do think that it is always a good time for us to stop and pause and realize that we can take a breath. It's a fresh new day. And it is a time for us to really think about moving forward. It's a time for us to think about the forgiveness and moving forward. And so what tends to happen is that I see a lot of companies doing really wonderful things and putting a lot of procedures and policies and education in place. But sometimes I have seen procedures and policies built on this sense of pain and of strife. And it becomes almost like we are propagating racism and this sense of us versus them, and you've done me wrong, and therefore, forgive me, there's somebody at the door, but yeah. But it's this idea that, the more that we think about being anti anything, unfortunately, the more it grows. It's just the law of attraction. It just tends to happen. The more that we think about being anti-racist, the more we are going to continue keeping the idea of racism in our minds. And so what I like to say, and I almost joke about it, is I'm anti-racist. I would rather eradicate that word from our vocabulary and just stand for pro-love. What would it be like if we all woke up one day and just said, you know what, forget about racism. We're not even going to think about it anymore. Let's just stand for the love of diversity, the love of inclusivity, the love of humanity. Everybody matters. And then just move forward. Let's move on. Let's think about ways that we can have our next generations not even know what it means and not even know that pain. Wouldn't that be what we really want? And so those are some of my thoughts. I know that it's a bit controversial, certainly, because a lot of people find identity in that pain and that struggle. But honestly, if we continue to kind of pick at that wound, it's not going to necessarily heal. So I think that the best way for us to heal is to find that ability within ourselves to get that forgiveness, do that deep dive within ourselves to see where we have work to do, and let's move on from there.
Yeah, that is a very interesting perspective, Jennifer, and thank you so much for sharing. And as I'm hearing you talk, I know that you've done so much deep work, and it really helped answer Sarah's question of how do we keep our eyes on the bigger picture as we move through these day-to-day struggles. And just reflecting back on what some of my personal struggles were. And I think in just some of the conversations too, that like Melissa was sharing about history and looking back at history, I think there's been a missed opportunity to celebrate identity. And I'm just curious, Melissa, if you're seeing that come up in the conversations of in the trends where brands are really trying to figure out how to find their voice and celebrate, and that might propel into this bridge of being able to move forward out of a place of love. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, so we actually had a whole trend story and we called it Empathy Revolution because it really was about being empathetic, about not just, again, creating a product because it's going to sell, because it's trending, but really understanding, who is your consumer. And at the end of the day, like, again, I can talk about so many trends, but it's really up to the brand to know their core of like who their consumer is, what do they stand for, and not have to feel like they have to jump on every single one of them. So yeah, I think there is that, kind of, I think with empathy also just comes more of this community, which we're doing now. It's like, I think we're also seeing so much community driven. Like it was also very like, okay, you're a corporation, I'm this, like, you versus me. And now it's like, how do we work together? How do we work with these companies? How do we work with the consumer? How do we just as humans come together, be empathetic, be more loving, be softer, and create what at the end of the day, both the brand wants to give and the consumer wants. So I think that's definitely, there's almost like, kind of speaks to what Jennifer mentioned, that healing comes with the healing comes like the softness. So that, the language that we use, how we talk to each other, how we sell products. So definitely a shift for the good, I think.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like what you're saying, the language, and Cece, I think that it just kind of broke my heart when you said people were asking, what does indigenous mean? Not having the language to identify a people group, or for a people group to be able to identify themselves, or and I think for you, Ashley, the visual aspect to not being able to have the word or the language or the visual reference. If you don't have either one of those, it's really hard to maybe even locate yourself as a professional, as an individual, as a person, so you can start that journey. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Cece and Ashley, on those 2 points, having the language and then having that that visual recognition.
Yeah, I personally believe that until you are a corporation or a company and give spaces to people directly inside these business making decisions, then you're not really going to get like an authentic 100% perspective and feeling and respect from a whole, like a person from a specific culture. Because I'm all for being positive and I'm all for healing and forgiving and all of those things, but you can't really begin to do those things if you don't change at the core of what the rooted problem is. And for a person of color, and I'm just speaking for me personally, I have been in positions, or I've been in conversations, or I've even been a part of potential collaborations, and like, just to speak plainly, they'll just say like, I don't know how to market you, or I don't know how to make money off of you, essentially, is what they're saying. And so what happens is, when you think about Indigenous people and Indigenous culture, um, the one thing that we always go back to is who we are as a people, and that's identity. Like, and our identity, you can try to erase it all you want, but our identity is literally our blood and our bones spilled into the land where we're still at today, and preserving the land and preserving our stories, and creating a change, a narrative of what people see about us in history books, or what they look at when they think of a Native American woman, that she has to have long hair and she's beautiful and she's sexy and she's a costume on Halloween. Like, that's not who we are. And so when you start to think about real healing and you start thinking about real change, it's having those conversations that make you uncomfortable and say, you know what, today, if I really want to be the change, if I really want to put into practice of what healing and what forgiveness and what story narrative change looks like, then I think you have to really take that Band-Aid off and that seal over your eyes and really call something for what it is. And so I have just been so grateful to be in these, conversations where people really don't want you to sugarcoat anything. They want you to say, how do I change? How can you help me move forward? And I think that, speaking to what Melissa was talking about, decolonization, what beauty looks like, and what the story of what beauty needs to look like, I think that that's an important, like, standing point. Because for me personally, my team and I just made a TikTok yesterday about how we go to, the magazine stands, and they are all, full of people who don't look like us. And it's a conversation that speaks to, how do you change that? Well, you change that through the Ashleys, and you change that through the Melissas, and you change that, through the Haleys, and you change that through, everyone that's here on the panel, by saying, okay, this is a conversation that we need to have, and we need to continue to share that work. And so yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Ashley, this might be a great question for you. Hi, Jessica. It's good to see you on. She's asking, what are some standout things that you guys think beauty brands can do to support DEI in their marketing? And what are some brands, in your opinion, that do this well? In your line of work, working in fashion and marketing and positioning, Ashley, does this come up for you? And do you have some examples?
I think it does. And from multiple ends, where sometimes I always say too, like a client or a company doesn't always know what they need until they see it sometimes. So so on this end of the agency now, we're able to push showing other options, showing the range, not always kind of going to maybe the cookie cutter that we have been, like you've said, the last 5-10 years. Like, let's show them something different. Let's show them something new. And I think that is like a slow progress that is happening. I see more and more companies doing this and pushing it. For example, I feel like one that always comes to mind is like a Fenty, just showing that range and just showing that beauty comes in all shapes and sizes, especially within the beauty brands.
So great. And I think some of the things, the visuals that I've seen from your company is they seem to be more like candid moments. It's
Yeah.
not so like polished. There is like a way to creatively position the model or take the shots that just seem more natural in general and someone in their natural environment.
Yes, catching like the authenticity of moments. And I think too, it's really great. I think at Natural, a lot of the models are also very supportive or committed to like the clients that we have as well. So it's kind of this dance together. The models are very happy and proud and feel supported by the clients. And then the clients also feel that they're able to represent for everyone as well too. So I think it's like it's this dance together to make it all come together.
Yeah, and you're helping facilitate those conversations and relationships as
Yes.
well. And I'm also curious for like for some of your scouting and as you're trying to make more options available to your clients to choose a visual representation for their brand, are you prioritizing like indigenous models, or are there certain segments that you see that there's a greater need for that y'all are trying to create spaces for those
Yes.
communities?
And I would say like in general, I think even too when I read some of the comments on our social media or anything where there's a lot of girls that are like, I don't think that I could do this. Or even we hear from some of the models, we have a couple Indigenous models who really speak about like, I didn't think back in the day that I would ever see someone like me. And here I am being able to be the person to show it for the next future, the next generations. So we're always consistently always looking for just the unique, the genuine. I think we kind of have a bit of a reputation too. Like when there's a natural girl, you can tell it's a natural girl because there's just there's a mood, there's an energy, there's just a love for life and wanting to give more than just what the basic part of the industry is.
And I'm just kind of feeling like a full circle moment of this journey, this pain journey, in a way to the celebration. I think that Jennifer was talking about, like being able to see that love, and when you have someone, a model that does feel that support and can celebrate who they are, and that love really shines through, that captures the true empathy. I think that Melissa is talking about that we're all craving. So this has been like the most amazing conversation. I know we could keep going on and on, but our time is up. And I just want to take the last minute to ask you all, what is one takeaway that you want, like in one word, what is one takeaway you would like for people to leave this conversation with? Cece, why don't you go first? And then Jennifer, Ashley, and then Melissa.
I think for me, it's always knowledge. I always try to end a conversation, or I appreciate Jennifer and her sharing her story about her baby and the things that are important to her, and what makes his life easier and her life easier to take care of someone who has a disability. And it gets those wheels turning of what can I do, as not just as a founder and a CEO, but also as a person. I think sometimes we're so focused on our own personal journey and what we're trying to accomplish that sometimes it makes it easier for us to just be like one-sided and not see outside. So I think for me, it's always just knowledge, walking away from every single conversation, learning something or teaching something. So that's what I always try to do, is just share knowledge or gain knowledge.
Thank you. Jennifer, what is one word for you that key takeaway you'd like for people to leave with today?
One of my favorite words, it's an odd word, but one of my favorite words lately has been transmute. So transmuting pain into purpose. And when we talk about purpose, it's like what can we learn and then just like expand ourselves from and elevate ourselves from out of the pain to convert into purpose. And one thing, just following some of the conversation that we had, is I would suggest to a lot of companies and brands to not delegate purpose to the marketing team. It has to be something that pervades the entire organization from top down. People have to live DEI all the way through their organizations. And then that's the way that it's truly authentic.
That's great advice. Okay, so we have knowledge, we have transmute, Ashley, what is your word that
I
you want
first have to
people to
say,
see?
I love that, Jennifer, that it has to be all the way through the company is 100%. It can't just be a department and it can't just be an area. It has to be all the way through. So props to that. My word would actually probably be, or the big takeaway would probably just be like authenticity. Just being your authentic self. I think the more we as humans are our authentic self, companies are starting to see the shift, and then they are able to respond to that as well. And I think that only just trickles down the effect down the road too. So just being authentically you every day.
Thank you. And then Melissa, what is your one word key takeaway for the audience?
I think mine will be transparency. I think, it kind of goes with authenticity too. Like, even if you don't know what to do, if you're trying to figure it out, or if you're educating yourself, just be transparent about it. Being like, we're trying to do better. We're educating. We're trying to, be in this space. And I think the consumer would appreciate that much more than just, putting out something that's going to backlash. So yeah, I think, being transparent in communication and everything is the most important thing.
Yeah, we're seeing that talked about so much these days in all different avenues. So my key one word takeaway, which is really the inspiration for Beyond the Bench Talks, is curiosity. You're all here today talking about this topic because I'm very curious. I want to know. It is that knowledge. I'm curious to gain knowledge. How do we do better? How do we show up? How can we not hide anymore? So I just thank you all so much again for your time. I know you're all so busy and have important things to do. And so I feel so honored and truly grateful. So we will have all of your contact information in the show notes. And there might be some special offers. There might be some reports or pieces of information that can be shared. And so thank you all so much for this fabulous Friday, and make it a great day.
We love you, Haley.
Bye. Love
Thank
you too.
you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.